Hello, my beautiful friends. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single upload. I love and I appreciate you so much. Today we are doing episode 13 of viewer submissions. These are the stories that you send in to me and I read them for you. As always, thank you so much to everybody who sends your story in, and thank you to everybody in the comments who is always sending the most love and support. You guys are all so amazing. If you have a story that you want to share, you can email it to me at sherrilynstories@gmail.com. I apologize in advance if I'm like very shallow breathed or not all there today. I threw out a couple ribs over the weekend and I'm not feeling too good. Even the little giggles, they're like a little shots of death in the rib cage, so please bear with me. All right, our first story says, hi. First, I want to say I love your channel and I love how safe you make us all feel to share our stories with you. I've been a silent viewer for some time, but after watching how respectfully you share everyone's story, I felt like it was time for me to share the story of my childhood best friend. Unfortunately, it's a very heavy and gut-wrenching story, so I apologize for that. Trigger warning, it involves child sexual abuse, drug use resulting in death of multiple children, sexual assault and abuse, domestic violence resulting in death, sex work, and drug use. I thought it was important to not only share this story to make others aware of the warning signs, to get my best friend's story out there, especially because her story, like many, was not taken seriously. Did not make the news, was covered up, and she has not had any justice. And I just want to help her family get closer to some peace. Thank you so much for everything that you do. We live in Irvine, California. Everybody calls it a sleepy town, meaning that nothing really happens here. We all have grown up keeping our doors unlocked and felt safe in our community. We've lived here our entire lives. My friend Allison and I have known each other since we were babies. Our mothers Sharon and Rebecca met while in high school, and although they lost contact over the years, they ended up reconnecting when they were in their early 20s. My mom, Sharon, had been kicked out of my grandma's home due to not following the rules and had been with a lot of different guys that were abusive. And because she was too prideful to admit that she was wrong and apologize to my grandma, she had decided she'd rather shack up with a few people in hotels, tents, and parks. Rebecca was also doing that, but unfortunately, Rebecca was heavily into drugs and had gotten into sleeping with men for money. Rebecca had gotten pregnant with her first baby, which was a beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde-haired baby boy named Nathaniel, and he was perfect, just like an angel, my mom said. One night when Nathaniel was 2 months old, Rebecca left him with her mom while she went out of town until the early morning where she used drugs. She had stayed sober from the time she found out she was pregnant until he was 2 months old, so she used a lot that night. She came home in the early a.m. and passed out about 3 hours later. Nathaniel had woken up to bed feed, which was not rare. My mom had spent the night with her and begged her not to breastfeed that baby. Unfortunately, she did and said that everything would be fine. She put Nathaniel back to sleep in his crib and fell asleep. Many hours later, she came to check on him and found him unresponsive in his crib. Her mother, being a nurse, called 911, but unfortunately, they covered it up and it was ruled a death from SIDS. After Nathaniel passed, Rebecca lost it and spiraled downhill with drugs and sleeping with more and more men for money. She ended up pregnant again. This time it was with another little boy and his name was Daniel. And once again, he was born perfect and the same thing happened. She breastfed after using drugs and he sadly passed away and it was covered up and ruled a death from SIDS. Finally, at this point, my mom had decided to cut ties with her for a while and just focus on her, and that's when she met my dad. They instantly hit it off because my mom was still homeless and had nothing, and so was he, so they took care of each other. One day, my mom ran into Rebecca, and she was pregnant and sober, had a job, and was healthy. She was pregnant with my friend Allison at this point. My mom found out that she was pregnant with me a few months later. Rebecca had Allison a few months later and began partying again. And my mom stepped in because she would leave her with random people and men, causing her to be sexually abused over and over again. She was neglected by Rebecca, and Rebecca did not give her the motherly love she so desperately needed or wanted. My mom would babysit her and she would lay on her belly. We were only 6 months apart in age. And when I was born, she was always wanting to hold me. We were like sisters, but not by blood. As time went on, Allison was abused over and over throughout her entire life, which resulted in her acting out and acting older than she should, not really listening to her mom either. She got pregnant at 17 years old by a guy named Brian and had a daughter named Ainsley. She'd go on to have 4 more kids: Jordan, Riley, Hannah, and Luke. She was struggling with mental health, learning disabilities, and she also started struggling with substance abuse. We had our issues over the years, and we would be friends and then stop and then start again, and then drama would happen, and then I eventually just had to cut her off. It got to be too much. She met her husband Jeremy about a year or so ago, and they hit it off instantly. Jeremy was a guy that everyone loved being around. He would go out of his way to help anyone and everyone, even if it meant making himself broke. They were engaged for a short amount of time and married fairly fast. After being married for 4 months, she found out she was pregnant with baby number 6, which would be their first baby together. They were stoked. Unfortunately, the honeymoon stage did not last. Jeremy had a bad temper no one knew about, but soon Allison found out how bad it was. First, it was just yelling, but it escalated to punching holes in the walls, hitting her, grabbing her by her hair, choking her. You get the point. She tried to make reports, but no one would take her seriously because Jeremy works at our local police station. On the night of June 27th, 2022, oh gosh, that was just a few months ago, Allison and I were going out to celebrate my birthday with a few girls. I had just turned 31. We were going to have dinner and get some drinks, and Jeremy was not thrilled about that. He wanted to come with her. He never let her go anywhere by herself. She had gotten a babysitter, which was a college student that lived next door, to watch the kids, and she said, "Baby, go out and spend time with your boys. You've worked hard, you deserve it." Around 8 p.m., he finally decided, after debating back and forth with her about letting her go out, and said okay, and he went to go to a sports bar with his friends. He ended up drinking a lot and ended up doing a few lines of you know what, which made her angry. Allison started to cry and told us how bad things had gotten and told us she's tried to leave, but she can't. She pulled up her sleeves and she had bruises all up and down her arms. None of her skin on her arms was of the pale white. They were all black and blue. She had what looked to be like a footprint on her back also. We took pictures and promised to go in with her to make a report, and she shook her head and said no, she needs to get home. We all asked her if she was sure and told her we could go with her, and she said no, it'll probably make things worse. Little did we know that would be the last time any of us would hear from her or see her again. Allison made it home a little bit before 10 p.m. and Jeremy was waiting up, sitting in a chair, and as soon as she walked through the door, he started in with her. He accused her of sleeping with another man, and this is why she could not answer the phone. He called her horrible names, he grabbed her by the neck, by her hair, and forced her to perform a certain act on him. When she refused, he punched her in the face with a closed fist 3 times. Her eyes were both bruised, black and blue. She had a broken nose, broken eye socket. He choked her with his belt and left the marks on the belt around her neck. Okay, this is freaking really heavy. She was assaulted with foreign objects. She had bite marks up and down her body, on her breasts, and she was stabbed 3 times. Jeremy then redressed her limp body and got some rope and hung her from her stair banister to make it look like suicide. And what makes it even worse is that the kids were in the next room wide awake when their mother was murdered by someone she thought loved her. The oldest child saw some of what happened and was able to call 911 from inside the room that they were in. When Jeremy realized what was going on, he picked up items that were knocked over during the struggle and typed a quick suicide note up on her phone, and he left and went into a nearby rest stop and cleaned himself up and stayed at a friend's house, so he made it look like he knew nothing. Sadly, her death was ruled a suicide. Sadly, no one saved her. No one listened to her when she told them he was hurting her. I still cannot believe that my best friend is gone. I still cannot believe what those poor children had to hear, see, and now have to struggle with every day without their mama. Allison did not have the best life. She did not have the best mom growing up, but despite the odds, Allison was an amazing young woman that stepped up and became the mom that her mom was not. She loved all of her children with everything she had. She was a hard worker. She was smart, brave, caring, loving, and she was beautiful inside and out. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of her or miss her. I cannot believe something this heartbreaking and horrific happened in our sleepy little town in California. If you are a victim of any form of abuse, please know that it is not your fault. Please know that it is not easy to ask for help or to leave a situation, but know that you are worth it. Thank you again if you do share this story. If not, I understand. Stay safe, everyone. Stay aware. And if you are meeting anyone new, always let someone know where you are going and who you're meeting with. Thank you again for sharing her story. Sorry for how heavy the story is, but I feel because it's not getting media coverage, it needs to get out there more now than ever. I would prefer if you kept my name private, especially since her killer is still on the loose. Her family has made a GoFundMe and has asked me to share it with you and your followers since you have a huge following. Stay safe. Whew. Okay. There is just so much to unpack here. I think that how you ended this was just so wonderfully put. If any of you are in a situation or you know somebody in a situation, as hard as it can be, as much as you want to even stay out of it, if you see somebody going through this, please talk to somebody. Please tell somebody. You know, even if you want to save this video for reference, if somebody is coming to mind and this is something that you want to share with them privately, sometimes this is exactly what somebody needs to know, the severity of their situation, because it does always start out by something, you know, just raised voices, arguing here and there, and it slowly increases from there. And I think one thing that we've all learned from these viewer submissions is that domestic violence is far too common and the majority of the stories that I get, and that just is... It's heartbreaking, exactly like this submitter said, you know, like Allison's life was taken by the person that she thought loved her. And as a partner, that is your responsibility on both sides, whether you're the man or woman in the situation, or whether, you know, like you're the woman and the woman, or the man or the man. If you are in a relationship, you as a whole and together are required to take care of each other, love each other, respect each other. And if that's not what you're doing, or if that's not what you're receiving, that's not love. You are not in a healthy relationship or situation. I will have the GoFundMe linked in the description if anybody wants to head over there and send some support to the family. All right, our second story says, this happened in Missouri in 2009. Trigger warning, this true crime story includes domestic violence and rape. For anyone out there who is listening, don't listen to the story if you are not ready to hear some of this. I was 4 at the time. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and my mom and dad met when my dad was a father of 2 children at 18 and my mom was 16. My mom ended up getting pregnant when she was 17 with my first full-blood sibling. She felt like it was her obligation to marry my father because they got pregnant so young. Don't ever do this, because there were a lot of red flags from my dad. He would stalk her at her house and yell at her and hit her when she would talk to any guy, no matter if it was at work or not. He would always tell her what she could or couldn't wear. My mom would leave him for a little bit, but then always come back to him. I'm pretty sure I was a R baby from him. He would never take no for an answer if she did not want to do anything. Fast forward to when I was 4 years old, they had a court hearing for divorce because my mom was finally ready to leave him. After the court hearing, my dad snuck into the trunk of her car with a pocket knife and a rope. He climbed out from the back seat while she was driving on the highway and put the knife up to her throat and told her to pull over. They got out of the car and my dad strangled my mom for a couple minutes, got her on the ground so she was not able to come up, and stabbed her in non-fatal places until finally stabbing her in the heart. Oh my gosh. To this day, he still says he didn't do it and that my mom had a boyfriend that none of us knew about. But we all know that wasn't true. My mom was very Christian, and I always believed no matter what, if she was planning on getting divorced or not, as long as she was still legally married, she would have never been with anybody else. I just hope nobody else feels like they have to marry the father of their child because they got pregnant too young. I also hope that if there are any kids out there in my situation, don't feel bad for getting to know their father. I am currently doing that just because I want to get to know him. But also, I don't talk to him in the month that he murdered my mom or the month that she was born. I hope you're all having a lovely day, and thank you so much for reading my story. It's not out there at all. It was shown on the news once, but never talked about again. And I want other people to hear this and learn from my mom and my family's mistakes. A couple weeks before she was murdered, she told my aunt that my dad would never let her get pregnant with another man. So she gave my crib to my aunt, who didn't know she was pregnant at the time, but apparently my mom did. I never really knew my mom, but I was told that she was an amazing and loving human. Her and I look similar, and we also share the love of babies and children. I want to somehow get a job in a field where I can help other people, but mainly kids. Please share the story so it can get out there. And again, thank you so much if you do. Wow, these are heavy. I mean, they're all heavy, but it just leaves me in awe of how strong you all are who submit these stories and like what you have been through, and then your resilience of, just admitting like if somebody's out there in my situation and this has happened to somebody, like your parent or loved one or somebody very close to you, and you still have a relationship with the person that did it because they're your parent. I think we've spoken about it in some other episodes where that dynamic doesn't really get spoken enough about, because there's this, I'm sure, internal battle of trying to battle those emotions of mourning somebody that you love but maybe didn't remember or know because you were so young, and then knowing that it's the other parent who took them from you, but you still want to know them because that's your parent. I can't imagine that dynamic. But there are so many people who deal with that and who are in your situation. So thank you for sharing that and making them not feel alone. And it's very good to see that you even have boundaries of that relationship, and you've laid out your guidelines of how you can cope and maintain that by not, speaking to him on certain months. And I think you are a very, very strong person. And I truly hope that you do get into a field where you can help other people or kids, because it sounds like you have a great head on your shoulder and a very big heart. All right, our next story says, hello, a friend of mine suggested that I email you about my daughter. I will do my best to do the timeline as correct as possible, although my mind was numb. First, my daughter was 23 at the time of her death. Christmas 2019, she came home to my home in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She had her new baby Trinity with her and was seeing her then 3-year-old daughter Yanni that I had custody of since she was born. It was all bittersweet. She stayed with us for about 2 weeks. On January 6th, she was going back to Orangeburg, South Carolina. She would be soon moving into an apartment there. This would be her first home. She ran away when she was 16, almost 17, and lived a life on the streets, selling herself for money and drugs. But finally, she was turning her life around. About a week into her living in her apartment, Trinity was taken away due to her failing a drug test. DSS called me, and I took her. Here's the story. The 26th and 27th of January, there was no contact with her. Her phone was dead, no social media activity. I was able to check all of these due to her phone being on my plan. The 28th, I had a feeling she wasn't okay. I called the OCSO and asked them to do a wellness check. They said they did, and no one answered, but they would put Ebola out on her. They didn't. I went into the hospital, got out on the 30th, still no activity on anything. Again, I called and I spoke to a deputy and he stated that he would file a missing persons report and enter her into the NCIC in case she went across state lines. I asked for an incident report number. They told me for missing people, they don't have incident report numbers. I thought that was odd because I knew every incident needed a number. Again, they said they went to her apartment and the door was locked. Because we had an active DSS case, I called her social worker, who had also been trying to get in contact. On the 30th, her apartment door was locked. Social worker put a sticky note on her door. Again, the police didn't check. We decided to do a missing in South Carolina post. The dates are now all running together. But on February 9th or 11th, a girl posted a comment. That girl's dead. She's been dead. Said girl ended up being her next door neighbor, and they could smell a terrible odor. That odor was my daughter's decomposing body. The door was unlocked and ajar. I still never received a phone call. They called me and they confirmed it was her several days later. No investigation was being performed. They continued to tell me it was a suicide or an overdose. When her toxicology report came back, her system was clean. They stated on her death certificate, undetermined cause of death. According to her timeline, my daughter had been dead since January 28th. They still to date have not returned my calls. They have never listened to what I had to say. They stood by their comment. She was an adult child, just not wanting to be found. Hey, this is not a runaway. She was in her apartment. I know there is more that I'm leaving out. I know someone knows something. I'm not sure my story is worth your time. Oh, that breaks my heart. I just don't know where to go from here. If you'd like to search her, her full name was Kiana Danae Joins. Her birthday was March 5th, 1996. The attached picture is the only one I have of all of my girls together. Thank you for taking the time to read this. May you continue your amazing journey with true crime stories. Sincerely, Maya Danglemeyer. First of all, Maya, I'm so sorry for your loss. It bothers me so much. It makes my blood boil when people are not taken seriously, especially when there is a history of, whether it's a drug addiction or mental illness or a profession that professionals don't, or law enforcement don't agree with. I hate that this is so common. If you ever decide to look into this more and you need support, please reach out to us. The fact that her death certificate states undetermined may sound hopeless in a sense because they have not ruled it like a definitive foul play, which is what your belief is. But, and I mean, I'm not an expert. This is just in my opinion of working with a lot of cases and learning more about death certificate rulings. Undetermined is actually in your favor because they haven't solidly ruled that out suicide. So there's still a lot of room for an investigation here. I'm sure that task feels very daunting, but like I said, if you ever need support or anything, or maybe some advice on where to go or how to do that, please reach out to me. But yeah, just seeing right here off of the death certificate, all hope is not lost for you. Okay, our next story says, my name is Naomi Soto, aka Nana. You can find me at Naomi Nas on Insta if there's confusion in my writing. First off, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to read my uncle's story. It truly means more than you'll ever know. You don't understand how much your videos are helping people all over the world. I just want to give a whole round of applause and say again, thank you for everything you do. You're an amazing mother, woman, and person. My gosh, thank you so much. You do not have to compliment me before I read your stories, but it's very appreciated. And I feel the same about all of you. Phew, okay. I like the way you write stories. Okay, so this story is something my mom always talks about. She would always tell us about her handsome, smart, sweet brother who she lost too soon. A day that haunts my family forever. Although I never met him, I feel him every day. Sounds crazy, but I know he's always with us. My uncle's name was Jose Colon. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. His birthday was June 18th, 1981. He was 20 years old from Suffolk County, Long Island, New York. He was going to college and working full-time to get ready on the arrival of my baby cousin. He was the kindest, most wholesome person anyone knew. And so the story goes as follows. On April 19th, 2002, at around 10 p.m., Jose made his way to meet with a friend quickly to drop off $20 that he previously owed him while his pregnant girlfriend was in the car. Jose was calmly standing outside on the porch after being done with paying his friend back. Suddenly the atmosphere changed, and Jose realized that the house was surrounded by Suffolk County police officers. As a group of 4 officers neared the front door, 2 men opened the door and walked out. The officer leading the raid, who was carrying a 9mm submachine gun, stopped short. The officer behind him tripped over a tree root and bumped into the lead officer, setting off his gun, the police said. The shooting occurred on a Friday at 10:40 as officers from the police department's emergency service division prepared to raid the house in Bellport, New York, where they believed drugs were being sold by armed dealers. Lieutenant Fitzpatrick said that just before the gun went off, officers had asked Jose and the other man who stepped outside, identified as Aaron Hatcher, 20 years old, to drop to the ground. Mr. Hatcher had complied, the lieutenant said, but apparently Jose had not. He was still moving down the steps toward the officers, the lieutenant said. If he's moving towards them, they're not going to continue to rush him, which probably led to the lead man stopping. Jose did not have weapons or drugs with him. 3 shots were fired from the gun, and just 1 bullet hit Jose in the head. Detective John N. Fitzpatrick, commander of the Suffolk County Police Department's homicide squad, said Jose was pronounced dead early Saturday morning at a nearby hospital. The police would not identify the officer whose gun discharged, but Newsday reported that it is Tony Gonzalez, a 14-year-old veteran with the police department. In the raid, the police recovered at least 8 ounces of marijuana and a loaded semi-automatic rifle from the house, and arrested 4 men on charges of second-degree marijuana possession. The police said no one lived at the house. Although police said the shooting was accidental, they could not resist the temptation to try to implicate Jose in his own death. According to Suffolk Police Chief Philip Roboletto, Jose and Aaron were coming out of the front door of the house as the police raiders approached. The two young men were instructed to drop to the ground. He was asked a number of times, "Show your hands," and when he didn't, that's when the accident occurred. The case was taken to trial, but sadly none of the officers involved were convicted for any crime. This is his story of the terror some police caused in New York, and to this day we mourn for the wrongful death of my uncle. This is really frustrating, and not to say that I condone possession of large masses of marijuana. If you were doing a raid for marijuana, I realize there was a weapon there as well, but there is nobody's life worth taking over an 8-ounce marijuana bust, especially as we now know an individual who was not even involved and was simply leaving the building. But let's just say this was somebody who was a part of this bust. We really think that you need to be that equipped with like the whole like riot and raid gear and so on edge that somebody like tripping sets you off into this panic that you shoot some innocent person? I also realized this was in 2002 and the weed laws were a lot stricter than they are now, whereas like everything is just kind of opening up and becoming legal in controlled quantities. However, I just like, this is so, it always brings me back to my argument of consequences for weed being harsher than for child predators or domestic violence abusers like we see all of the time. It just really boils my blood, and I'm sorry, so sorry you lost your uncle this way, and this is not justice. Oh, I can't even imagine how you're feeling, because I am just like, it's toasty in here because I'm really upset. Okay, our next story says, "Hello, Sherilyn. Trigger warning for domestic violence and beheading. I started watching your videos this year, but I really love your content. How you talk about the victims in these cases has been very refreshing. You don't make true crime content focused on the shock values and scandals. You really make the story about getting justice for the victims and their families, and I really love that." Oh, I just have to say thank you so much for saying that. Like I've said, you guys don't have to compliment me or anything like that before reading, but I love being seen. I'm really struggling some days with, especially right now, I know that there's like a huge light being, shone on ethical true crime, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. I do think that there is true crime content out there that is not always ethical. And unfortunately, that is usually more favored in an algorithm. I think, the way you put it, like shock value and stuff like that is, it's just what's more clickable, sadly. And so it's taken a really long time for me to build up my channel because I do want to be sensitive and not scandalous and work with families in cases that might not get that media attention and that shock value. But this is what I want my channel to be about and what I want my platform to be about. I want to use it to help in any way I can, whenever I can. I don't know what the point of it is if you're not. So it's been a testing past month specifically. I think it's very focused on ethical true crime and kind of getting some heat by people who don't ever watch my channel and don't understand what I strive to do and the message that I really want to send. So thank you for that. I needed that. And I apologize. I did not try to make that about me. That really touched me. All right, let's continue with this story. This story isn't really mine, but I have deeply been impacted by this case. Last week, this would, I'm going to assume, be several months ago because my inbox is like so full. I apologize. A woman literally 3 years older than me was murdered, beheaded in a very public street about 5 minutes away from my house. This woman was a mother of 2, and her ex-partner decided to kill her in the morning when she was getting into her car. I'm kind of unsure whether or not to put her name out there because this is still an ongoing case. I suppose my thoughts would be if it was in the media, generally it would be okay, but I usually try to go based off of requests from the family. So if the family has been in the media asking for help and assistance, and then I kind of gives you an indication that they support it, that's usually when I'd share the name. So I'm just gonna, since I don't have the name or the information, I'm just gonna leave it like this. and not like dig for it and put it out there because I don't know how the family feels. That being said, this story has impacted me in many ways. I drive by the street of her apartment where the murder took place every day to get back home. Also, you can choose to include this if you want, but again, it's up to you. I have abilities to interact with the dead. Well, the night after the murder, I had a dream of the woman and the murder. At the time, we didn't know her name or face. I saw what happened. I wasn't scared, oddly enough, but I saw her face. While I was talking about it the other day to a friend, I went to find a link to send her the article, and the article showed the face and the name of the woman. It was the same face I saw in my dream. Mind you, I never met this woman or knew her. Ever since then, I keep thinking about what I can do to help. Now I know the town where this all took place is raising money to help support the girls. I knew immediately that I had to email you. These girls have lost their mom, and I have no idea what that would be like. What I do know is that we can help them, especially with your voice. Along with this online community, we can support these girls. Thank you so much for everything, Flora. All right, there is a GoFundMe, so I guess I would be comfortable in sharing that because this is going to support this. The intention is to support the family. So thank you so much for sharing this. This is just another reminder. I mean, it's just baffling how many domestic violence cases there are, like how many more need to happen. And a great example of how taking somebody's life has this effect on so many more people that you would even consider. I mean, this is a stranger who never knew her, who was impacted by this. The wake of the devastation is just like ongoing, and I truly hate that it's almost like there's this entitlement that comes from abusers in like domestic violence situations when it's their spouse or, you know, their partner. Like, I know them, I love them, I can do this. Does that make sense to you? Like that's what I feel like. That's why there's so many, to think that you have this right to do that to somebody based on the fact that you were together or once together. Oh, we need to make Jurassic Jail like real life, like right now. Okay, our next story says, "Hey girl, I've been a long-time listener, fan, and have been blessed with a like from you. I would like to ask for some help. Maybe this is not for Sherrilyn Stories, but it's interesting. I'm first of all glad you live in Edmonton because you can appreciate the landscape where this mystery is set. I get to spend time in Calgary and we have visited the West Edmonton Mall, but I live full-time in Toronto, Ontario. We, my family, also have a property in a small town north of the city in a remote area. It's known as Muskoka. You could picture Ontario's version of Banff. Ooh, nice. Wild country, bears, moose, yep, got it, deer, totally. I'll see each one on my way to anywhere when staying there. That is a very accurate picture of Banff, so now I know what Muskoka looks like. A lot of this area is rich pre-Bay $1,000,000+ mansion cottages, but the 120,000 locals are generally humble people, and they are smart enough to know you do not walk down a dead-end road February 1st when it's -30 and dropping as it's 4 p.m. and the sun sets at 5:24. So why was this the last place Matthew Alford was seen, and why is no one looking for him? His family reported him missing on the 4th of February. He was listed as a Huntsville man, last seen walking on a dead-end road. Updates in March said he was believed to be in Mississauga, Ontario, a 3-hour car ride away when he did not have a car, and that was it. This man has vanished. It struck me as odd, though. They said believed to be not last seen in Mississauga. There are other reports of Huntsville OPP not conducting proper missing persons investigations regularly, and now someone was missing not exactly far from us and no one seems to be searching. So far, we have made some contacts on the road he was last seen at and plan to investigate further. We have contacted the local news reporter that covered the case and he is making inquiries as well. We drove the road where he was last seen and have investigated as many of his Facebook profiles as we can find. Imagine if your loved one was just 3 paragraphs in a local newspaper, but missing from your world. My sister and I listened to so much true crime podcasts about things worlds away, and now we're trying to make a difference even for one man in our community. If you want to wait for updates and don't want to share this yet, that's fine. We'll keep you updated. No, we would love to support what you need. This is amazing that you're doing this for somebody from your community. The girls have said Matthew Alford was 45, 5'6", 170 pounds, light brown hair, missing since February 1st, 2022. Oh my gosh, it's this year. Thank you so much from the Anonymous Sisters. I heart clout, baby. Aw, heart baby clouts you too. Wow, this is unbelievable. Please keep us updated on how this is going. If you need any assistance, please let me know, us know. I always include all of the sip and tales because I know you guys are always willing and ready to support. You're truly the best. So the link that the Anonymous Sisters have provided, I will add so that you guys can see that in the description. And it says that he could be in the Mississauga area. So I'm wondering, do we have any Stippendales out there? Have you seen him? Please let us know. All right, this is our last story. It says, hi Sherilyn, let me start by saying I love your true crime videos. I came across your videos last year in December and I've been hooked ever since. The story I'm about to tell is probably going to be all over the place. Just bear with me, please. I'm Nae from South Africa. I want to tell you about my cousin Kay, who was murdered about 2 months ago in broad daylight. For more background, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him. He was 19 at the time. He was disabled and had a mind of a 5 to 6-year-old. He also suffered from seizures. We as the family always thought we'd lose him because of his seizures, not by being murdered. He was the light of everyone's world in the family and was just a joy to be around. At times he would be stubborn, but he had a good heart. He'd always be available whenever somebody wanted to see him or just to lend an ear. He was his mother's baby boy. She was specifically fond of him because he wasn't a normal kid. He was her special kid, she would call him. Now to the murder. This happened around 2:33 in the afternoon. He was murdered on a soccer field behind a shopping mall. What we know about the murder is that he was standing in line in a local grocery store for an elderly man for COVID relief funds that the government was providing for unemployed people in our country, when 4 guys came and just dragged him out of the store while people were standing and just watching him being drug out by these guys. We heard that one of the ladies behind called these guys, telling them he stole something from her, which he didn't, and so they arrived and took him away and murdered him in broad daylight. We, the family, heard that while these guys were dragging him out of the store, he was pleading and shouting that it wasn't him and that he didn't do anything wrong, but they took him anyway. They took him to a soccer field behind the shopping center where they shot him 3 times behind the head, execution style, and burned him. By the way he was lying, we believe he was on his knees when he was shot. I still remember when I got notified he was no longer with us. I started crying my eyes out. Me, my cousin, her mother and aunt, and one of his brothers went to the scene. When we got there, his mother was already there with the police and a woman was comforting her. The first thing we saw arriving on the scene was his burnt body with one leg up in the air. Oh my gosh. We stayed on the scene until they took him away, and it was one of the hurtful things we as a family ever experienced. I remember that evening I couldn't sleep at all. Actually, none of us slept that night. We were all crying right through the night for our cousin, son, and brother. Now to the investigation. The next day, his mother went to the police to open up a murder case and spoke to the detective about what had happened to him. The detective promised my aunt that he would do everything in his power to find out exactly what had happened to my cousin, but up until now, we still have no answers. My aunt hasn't spoken to the detective in a month, and he hasn't been in contact with her at all. The last time she spoke with him, he had a prosecutor tell her that they couldn't do anything about the case. Mind you, they got video footage of him being dragged out of the shop by these guys, and they were the last people he was seen alive with. The detective and prosecutor said that's not enough evidence to arrest them even for questioning. What? We as a family just want to know, what did he do to them for them to do this to him? He wasn't violent at all and wouldn't even hurt a fly. His murder still hurts so much and it has affected us all so much. Thank you for listening to my story. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry for your loss. This is just horrific, unimaginable, and really infuriating that you're feeling like you have no answers. At first I thought, okay, maybe since this happened this year, we know like behind the scenes, a lot of this investigation can just like feel like it's dragging on, but really there's work going on behind the scenes. But then to be told like they can't do anything or even question them once even though they have video footage of these individuals dragging him out of the store, like that makes no sense. You have every right to be outraged. This feels so wrong. The only thing that I can try to suggest and give you some hope is just don't give up for answers. Keep putting that pressure on. Don't accept no as an answer. If you watched last week's True Crime, that's a prime example of a family member not giving up, even when being told by investigators it's time to close the case. And you don't have to do that. You can just keep fighting, keep pushing, keep making noise. Again, I'm so sorry for your loss, and please know that your feelings are validated and your family and your cousin deserve justice. All right, you guys, that is it for me today. Thank you again so much to everybody who has submitted a story, everybody who sends support and love in the comments. You are all just incredible human beings, and I'm so thankful for you. Like I said, if you want to send in a story, you can do so at sherrilynstories@gmail.com. If you want to remain anonymous, please just let me know at the very beginning of the story. And if you can, please let me know at the very beginning if there's any trigger warnings. I mean, there usually are because of the cases that we're covering. So I know that people are prepared to have a trigger, but sometimes if what that trigger warning is already laid out there, it's a lot easier for people to process if they know what they're about to hear, or they can make that decision to skip ahead. So thank you all so much, everybody who does that for me, because it actually also helps me. It can be really heavy reading these and going through them. So if I'm just a little bit prepared as to what I'm about to read, I can kind of compartmentalize if I can read that at that time, or if I need to readdress it at a different date, or just even like later on in the day. So thank you. All right, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.